Hi all, this is Lynn with Paper Life, and today I wanted to do a tutorial on how I altered a book to make a journal cover with it. There's a lot of videos out there that do it. This was just something different that I came across the other day. You guys know me, I don't ever say, oh, I'm the first one to do this, because there's a lot of us out there that are doing junk journals, so with my luck, someone's already done it. But what I did was, a lot of times I'll find these journals, and like this one has a 3/4 inch spine. No matter how many times I say I'm just going to make a small journal, I never do. Usually 1.5 inches is like my bare minimum spine. You know, I've done probably up to 3-inch spines. So to me, it just doesn't work. So I want to show you that. I'm also going to try to show you how I do a hidden spine and cover a couple other things. This may end up becoming 2 videos just because I don't want to make a really long one and bore you guys to death. So if I don't get through all of it, I'll meet you back here tomorrow when I do the second part. So the way I'm going to do this today is the same way I made this journal for my daughter's book, because this was probably 1-inch spine to begin with, and I believe I made it, yes, 2 inches. So you could tell it could stand to be 2.5, maybe 3, but that's how it works. So when you get your books, a lot of times they'll have like a paper sleeve on the outside. I take them off, but I did want to show you with this one, it has a really pretty design on the back. And, you know, it's decent weight paper, so you might find something to do with those if you want to. If not, I understand we ran out of room. We can't save everything. So let's go ahead and first we're going to deconstruct a book. If you are going to do the same thing I'm doing here today and replacing the spine, you could make it easy and easier on yourself at least, and just cut straight through the cover, removing the spine completely. If you're not, then you're going to want to do it a little more delicately, and I'll go ahead and show you. I got 2 here today. This one is brand new. Let me find my score tool. Sorry about the arm. And you really don't have much of any space right here. If that's the case, what I do is just kind of work the cover, kind of pulling it apart, acting like it's been used a lot, I guess. And then you'll give yourself a little extra room. Older books tend to be a lot easier to get into. Like this one already, not even being opened, has quite a large gap in between there. So if you want to do it with an older book, it's a little bit easier. I'm going to make my life more difficult and do it with the new one. I'm kind of hoping that this spine is glued, the inner spine with your text block is glued to the outer spine, because some of them are that way. If it is, I would like to be able to show you how I remove that, even though it's not all that difficult. All I really do is cut it. So a little how a book's made is your outside paper here is actually glued onto the first and the last page of your text block. That helps to hold the pages in. So what we want to do is, you see how there's a little bit of a gap right here? We want to cut that. And this side is really the one you want to be a little more cautious on. I don't know how cautious I'm going to be trying to do this while looking through a camera monitor. So hopefully I don't cut through. Now, does this one have it? Yeah, it kind of does. Oh, see, it is glued. So all I do is just kind of cut and rip it, kind of pulling it away. Oh, and see, I cut through my spine. So don't do that. This is one of those steps. If you are going to keep the original book spine on there, you want to be a little more cautious. Take your time. Don't be trying to cut it fast like I am. Okay. I don't know if I said this, but you'll also find that at least every book I've taken apart also has like a little bit of a fabric mesh that goes between your pages onto your cover. That's another part that kind of helps hold the book together. So usually speaking, when I don't have a book that's probably the most difficult one I've ever tried to deconstruct, because this one is really being a pain. Once you get it open like this, it's much easier to slide your knife in between the two different sections. Okay, this is seriously the hardest book I've ever tried to take apart. The other day I tried recording this video and it was just one of those days when nothing seems to want to go right. And you really want to say what else could go wrong, but you're afraid to jinx yourself. I probably took apart 3 or 4 different books trying to record this video, and none of them were this difficult. So one of the ways, or at least the way I've seen done when people do the book covers like this, is they do it with the spine that's already in here. So at this point, you could basically just sew in your signatures, and then it's not the hidden spine. You'll actually have your thread on the outside. One thing I would recommend, though, would be to come in here and reinforce the spine. You can use Fabri-Tac. Yeah, that's the right name for it. I have it in a tape form. You could use packaging tape. You could use, sometimes you get the mail envelopes that are made out of the same thing. Sorry, both my dogs are inside and one's shaking. Really anything like that, you can just use a piece of fabric. I don't recommend using paper on your spines because as this, bends and folds in your gusset here, paper tends to want to rip. So I definitely recommend going with, thank you Thor, you too. I definitely recommend going with a fabric because it'll just give you that extra allowance. This one has, I don't know if you can really tell, but I'm sure you guys will know what I'm talking about. This has actually been like set in, it's recessed. If you don't want this on here, you could easily paint over it. You could use paper, fabric, whatever it is you want to use. If you're using paint or fabric, the recess could show through. So one thing I did, and I did it here on the spine, if you don't want that to show through, all you're going to do is basically sand over it lightly. I use 220 grit. It's kind of my go-to. And since you have a, decent size to your book cover, you can sand that down kind of flush and just, fade it in so it's not a real sharp, oh, you sanded right here because there's a nice little block. So that's where we're at on this one. What I did to remove the book covers from the spine is right here. I'm probably telling you guys a bunch of stuff that you already know. But in between the spine that's in the book and your book covers, you'll see a difference. You want to be careful. I don't want to cut into the book cover itself because I'm going to use that again just like it is. So what I did was I actually left part of this fabric up against the book cover. And that was just so I didn't overcut it. And then I just take my knife, rotary cutter, whatever it is you want to use, and just trim this paper up so that it's flush with the spine that was there. Or, sorry, flush with the cover board, the book board that was used. Just like that. If you happen to notice any of your papers have, like when I cut it, sometimes this inside paper wants to pull apart. If you're going to use this paper as it is, you can just glue that piece down. Usually I'm not going to. I'm going to cover it with my own paper fabric. So I'll just go through and kind of rip it off because I'm going to cover all that back up. It doesn't matter. But like that would be good enough for me because yes, it's not even. I didn't remove it all, but it's going to get covered. Easy peasy. Okay, nothing I'm doing today is easy peasy because everything's falling apart. Okay, anyways, so then you'll have two book covers. Take your signature block, put it away. They make for great papers. I use them for making pockets. I'll use them in other journals as pages. Just about anything you want to do. So save these. This is why we all have way too much book paper running around. Let me go ahead and get into, because here are the same thing, just the cover and the back, the two covers from another book. Sorry, I was trying to move some of the stuff out of my way. That I've already done the same things I was telling you about. Now what I'm going to use to cover my spine today is just some white cotton paper, or white cotton fabric that I've cut off a chunk from. I took some folk art, this one's antique copper. I don't remember exactly what I paid for it, but I'm sure it wasn't more than $2 or $3. I really like them. Now, the one thing I'll tell you is, at least when I've painted fabric in the past, I find that I go through more than I would think I would. This bottle was already open. I've used it before. There's still some left in there from this piece of fabric. So it's not like you need multiple bottles. So that's what I'm going to use today to cover my spine. I've already cut, here I'm going to flip it on this side so it's not so shiny. I've already cut my new book board, and I'm going to go ahead and show you what I use. It's the same thickness as my cover. So it is the same thing as a book board. And it's, at least I think it's cheaper, because every time I've looked to buy book board and what I've bought in the past has been more expensive with shipping and all that. So what I use, I'm trying to block the glare a little bit, is this 12-inch by 12-inch. It's a cake platter. Just be careful when you get them, because they do have some that are the pressed cardboard, like this is, more like a book board, and then they also have the corrugated. You don't want the corrugated. I'm going to show you how I prep mine. If I happen to be putting a light colored paper, a thin fabric, something where I'm worried about the silver shining through, if you look right on the edge, you can see basically this layer that has your shininess on it. A lot of times I can just rip it off. I'm going to go ahead and act like this one didn't completely rip, if I can get it to, because most of the time I can't get it to completely rip off like that one. I just grab my 220 sandpaper again. And underneath it is actually a white layer Oh, there you go. That's going to show a little bit. Yeah, underneath there's that white. So if I sand over it just a little bit, usually I can get it just kind of buffed down and become more transparent underneath whatever my material I'm using is. When I cut this with my razor blade, it was kind of dull, so it gave me a little bit of a raised edge. I just went around again with my sandpaper and just kind of buffed that down. So it's a really easy material to work with. From my experience with both that and bookboard, I haven't noticed any difference in what it'll do, how you have to prep it, what you need to do. The one thing, I don't always do this step, however, this time I decided to, is just take my sandpaper again, and all I did was rough up that shininess. It'll make your glue adhere better to it. So that's what we're at right now. If you do your faux book fabric, painting it, I recommend that you either wash it and dry it or iron it, because I've found that if you have wrinkles in your fabric, like here's one, it will show through your paint. The little ones like this one has, I'm not worried about it, but I did one the other day that I didn't do that to, and it had some pretty crazy wrinkles in it. So that would be my advice. Let's get on to putting this journal together. So what I've decided I want to do is I think I want this fabric to overhang probably 1.25 to 1.5 inches, because I'm going to do it on this one, how I'm showing it here. I'm going to do it just like this, where it has that little bit that hangs over. You could do it where you completely cover the book, whatever it is you want to do. So I have found that this is the easiest way to go about it. I'm going to grab my ruler, get on this lighter part of it. That was fantastic. I just knocked over all the stuff I'm going to need here in a minute. Oh, I'm going to eyeball about 1.5 inches and just draw a little bit of a line. The only reason I'm doing that is so when I put my new spine and my book covers on there, I'm putting them at the same height. You could cut this fabric down to the size that you need. I have found that this way just works a little bit better for me. I glue down my spine and then I cut my fabric. Because I want anywhere between 1.25 to 1.5 inches between my covers, 1.25 to 1.5 inches of my fabric hanging over my covers. I'm going to bring this in approximately, and I'm going to leave 1/4 for the gusset between the two. So I want to bring it in, I would say at least 2 or 3 inches, just to give myself a little wiggle room for when I make a mistake. I'm using Fabrifix today. You could use tacky glue. You could really use any glue that you want. Probably not something like a glue stick. Just my advice. I think we would want it a little bit stronger than that. I'm just going to put a decent covering on my new book board that I'm using up for the spine. Now, one thing that I have a problem with, you guys know I'm glue crazy and I tend to go overboard. You want to be cautious of that because you don't want to deal with that extra mass of the glue if it squeezes out everywhere, like mine usually does. So try to be better at it than I am. Now all I'm doing is laying that down. I'm trying to keep my spine lined up to where I made my pencil mark. And I do find that using a ruler up against it really helps, one, to put your spine down and then your covers, because then you know that it's straight all the way across the top and bottom. I don't think I said this. When I cut this material down for my book spine, my book spine, I wanted a 2-inch spine. I cut it to the exact height of my book cover, because when you put the two there, they're straight across the top. Yeah, that makes sense. At least in my head it did. So I'm just going to secure that down, make sure that it is nice and flat and the way I want it to be. Somewhere in that realm. Now, the one thing I'll say about using this fabric painted is that I find I need to be kind of cautious of using a score tool on it, because at least for me, it has seemed to want to leave marks in it if I go real crazy with it. So just be cautious, or press down from the other side. Now, we left this overhang, so when we fold it over, it gives us a nice edge. Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to come in here. Like I said, I want to leave about 1/4 of an inch for the gusset. So I'm just going to mark that 1/4 of an inch on both sides. Just like so. And I'm going to do the same thing on the bottom. You don't have to do this step. I mean, honestly, you guys know me. You can do it however you want to. You don't have to do anything like this. I find it's easier for me to go ahead and mark my margins, so I don't have to sit there and try to eyeball it. To me, it's just a quick little step that I can do to make it easier on myself. Now, I did one the other day where the covers already had some of the fabric hanging over on the covers, and I wanted to cover that up. I cut my material shorter than I should have, so all I did was move my covers in and take a little bit of that room for the gusset. So it doesn't have to be perfect. By no means. It's just what it's going to be. I'm going to go ahead and cut off some of this extra material on the side of it. Let's see. I'm going to cut it about 1.5 inches. The only reason I'm doing this is because my fabric that I'm using is kind of wonky. And since I'm trying to get it straight, I need to get down to a more reasonable size. I'm sure this would have been easier if I would have straightened up my edges before I glued my book spine down, but you know, when do I do easy? So what I'm going to do to fix my bow on that is I'm just going to put my ruler up here and make sure that I have my spine straight on my board, like so. I'm going to give myself a straight line up here. Another good thing about painting your fabric like this, and I actually went through and showed you how to paint this fabric one time on my Altered Little Golden Book videos. It's super easy, but the great benefit behind it is that, if I can line this up and have it straight, I am really bad about cutting fabric. It's just the way it is. I'm really bad about it. It never comes out really great. It tends to want to fray on me. But once it's painted like this, it comes out a whole lot better. A whole lot better. Yes, it does. Just so you know. Now that I've said that out loud, it's going to mess up on me. Again, I'm leaving about 3/4 of an inch overhang You can adjust this to whatever you want it to be on this side. All of these measurements that I'm giving are based on the book that I'm doing. You can change them to whatever it is you happen to be working with. I'm going to make sure that from my gusset line, as many times as I've said gusset, I'm hoping that's the word I actually want to be using. I haven't looked into it to figure out what the bookbinding terminology would be. Okay, so I have my gusset there. I'm going to do 1 inch, and I think I'm going to keep it with an 1.25 inches. I'm going to trim this off so that this overhang is about 1.25 inches. You want them to be pretty much the same between the two sides. With that being said, I don't think any of us are going to be pulling out a ruler to measure them and make sure that they're perfect on a journal that we make or we have. At least I'm not going to be. To me, as long as it looks good to the eye, I'm going to say it's good. I'm just trying to move this down to a even measurement, make it a little easier on myself. Okay, now I'm going to move it over 1.25 inches again. When you cut these side pieces, I find that it's best to take your time so that when you cut them, you don't have any frayed edges. Now, if you want to fold them in or maybe put some lace on top or something, you don't have to be that cautious with them. All right, let's go ahead and glue our covers on it. Now I have my straight line right here. So when I glue these down, I want to make sure that this top is lined up onto that straight line so that when we fold this over, it looks like it should. Okay, I say I'm going to make sure, but the truth is I'm going to try my best. Yeah, I'm sure someone else has thought to do this. I just hadn't. And then when I was making my daughter's book, of course, it went from, oh, this is going to be a small little journal to, okay, it's going to be really big. And I had this moment of, well, why hadn't I ever thought to do this before? I mean, it makes really good sense. So I wanted to share. Pull my ruler out again just to make sure that it is all pressed up the way it should be. Now what I've done is I've left, don't do that. I just glued that upside down. Okay, take 2, unedited. Okay, hopefully I don't have to flip that around and put any more glue. Okay, so what I've done here is your book cover should be upside down if you're looking at it this way. You want to make sure that your covers are pressed up nice and tight onto your ruler that's lined up with your new spine, leaving that 1/4 inch room for your gussets. All right, let's see if on this one, I glue it the right direction. Now, one thing I was thinking about today, while I was trying to get this stuff all together, is, and don't quote me on this because it was only an idea, and I have no idea if it would work or not. I wonder if, a lot of times when I find a journal, it's not the exact size that I need it. When I find a book, it's not the exact size that I need it to be. If it's bigger than I need it to be, not a problem. I can just cut it down. But if the book's smaller than I want it to be, I wonder if we could just glue some more of this book board, like a strip of it, on to make it bigger. I don't know. That's what I'm wondering. I don't know if that would work or not. If anybody's tried that already, I would love to hear how it worked out. Because if you glue it on and maybe put, you know, have the fabric up against it, so that's going to help hold it in place, I don't see why it wouldn't work. But I don't know. I don't know. I just didn't remove that little piece of paper right there when I was prepping this board, so I just put a little spot of glue there. Okay. Let's see. Yeah, that'll fold over good there. And that'll fold over good there. I'm going to check my time real quick. We're going to do this part quickly so that I don't go into 2 videos for some reason. This camera does that. What I want to do is I want to run a bead of glue in here along this edge, in here. And we're going to go ahead and fold this flap over. Now that we had that part of the flap folded over, what I want to do is I want to flip my book over. And from this side, I want to work my gusset down. And this takes a little finessing, a little time. But this is what's going to allow our books to open up without wanting to fold and bend in ways it shouldn't. The reason I went with the 1/4 inch gusset was that was about the size the book covers had to begin with. You can change that if you want to. Usually what I would base it off of is the thickness of 2 of my covers put together. So both the spine and the front cover. Hopefully that made sense. So if it's an 1/8 inch book boards, I want to do a 1/4 inch, yeah. So what I'm going to do so that this doesn't shut off on me is I'm going to go ahead and fuss with this side. I'm going to glue this down, and then we'll be back shortly and we will go ahead and work on our inside of our spine. Thank you guys for sticking with me. I will see you all later, and if you haven't joined Paper Lifers, come over and visit us. The link will be in the description.